Welcome to this explainer on the sneaky decision traps of early adulthood. There's this really fascinating shift that happens right around age 31. The wild impulsivity of your 20s fades and a new stability takes hold. But that brings a brand new danger. Your biggest threat isn't making reckless choices anymore. It's that you become an absolute expert at making highly rational arguments for extremely safe choices that, well, just keep you stuck in place.
So today we're going to unpack 10 of these subtle decision-making vulnerabilities, or traps, that trip us up, along with specific self-tests for each. We've logically grouped these into three main themes: overthinking and delay, clinging to the familiar, and outside pressures and investments. And then we'll wrap the whole thing up with the ultimate decision test. All right, part 1, overthinking and delay. Let's look at how we brilliantly disguise our decision avoidance as diligent, responsible preparation. Trap number 1 is confusing preparation with procrastination. You know the feeling. You tell yourself, I'm not ready yet. But often, if we're being honest, you're secretly hoping that if you just wait long enough, the decision will magically make itself. Once you hit your 30s, you know choices have real consequences. So what do? You research, you compare, you calculate costs, and then you research some more. But really, you're dealing with a maximization tendency. You want the absolute perfect option, and you're confusing gathering more information with actually gaining more certainty.
So here's your very first self-test. Pause and ask yourself, what specific information would actually change my decision? The problem isn't careful thinking, right? It's when the decision is already fully informed, but you just keep searching because committing feels uncomfortable. Listen, if you can't name a new piece of data that would actually change your mind, you aren't preparing. You're just postponing.
Moving on to trap number 2, the fear of permanently closing doors. Sometimes choices, like picking a career direction or committing to a relationship, aren't hard because you don't know what you want. They're hard because picking one path means literally killing off another possibility. Keeping your options open feels like freedom, but it's really just delayed commitment. So, try this self-test on for size. If I knew I could never revisit this decision, what would I choose? This immediately exposes what possibilities you are actually avoiding committing to. Trap number 3 is decision fatigue. Think about it. Like spending an entire hour agonizing over what movie to watch on Netflix, only to get so exhausted you just put on an old sitcom you've literally seen a dozen times. Well, that happens with major life choices too. First you overthink, then you delay. That relentless lack of resolution builds up massive mental frustration. And eventually you become so exhausted that you suddenly rush a final choice just to feel the sweet, sweet relief of having it over with. If you find yourself in that awful cycle of agonizing for weeks and then making a snap judgment, here is your self-test. Should I have set a deadline? The solution to decision fatigue isn't necessarily to think less. It's to set a strict deadline to force a choice before emotional exhaustion completely hijacks your brain. Okay, let's transition to our second theme, clinging to the familiar. Let's see how your hard-earned life experience can actually become a massive blind spot. Trap number 4 is the past success illusion. We so often ask, has this worked before? Instead of the absolutely crucial self-test, does this still fit my life right now? It is incredibly easy to confuse a solution that worked perfectly in the past, like, say, a chaotic, high-travel startup job in your 20s, with what fits your drastically changed current life. Your needs, your energy, and your priorities have completely shifted. Which leads us perfectly into trap 5, the safe choice bias. Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it's genuinely better, or just because I already know how to deal with its problems? We so often stay with something familiar, like a predictable but unfulfilling job, simply because changing it requires learning new skills. Challenge yourself here. See if you are picking the better path, or simply the one whose specific headaches you're already comfortable surviving. Trap 6 is automaticity. Now, when you have experience, you recognize patterns instantly. You think, oh, I've seen this before, and you just act. But your past can actually become a blind spot. Your self-test here is to hit the brakes and ask, is this situation actually the same? If you rush toward a familiar fix without observing the subtle nuances of the current problem, you are flying completely blind on autopilot. All right, moving to part 3, outside pressures and investments. Let's unpack the heavy, invisible weight of your past choices and societal expectations. Trap 7 is unconscious social preference. Look, social influence rarely looks like someone barking orders at you. Instead, it quietly distorts your choices. We naturally drift toward paths that are easy to explain at a dinner party, perfectly socially acceptable, and unlikely to attract criticism or disappoint the people around us. To combat that sneaky influence, use this piercing self-test.
Would I choose this if absolutely nobody knew what I chose? This question strips away all the external judgment, the need to impress, and the fear of letting people down. It leaves you totally alone with your options, revealing what you genuinely want in private.
Trap 8 is a big one, the classic sunk cost fallacy. You've spent years, money, or emotional energy on a degree or a relationship. Walking away feels like admitting that investment was entirely wasted. But your self-test is simple. If I hadn't already invested so much in this, would I choose to start it today? If the answer is no, the only thing tethering you to that choice is a ghost of your past.
Our ninth major trap is the responsibility bias. Early adulthood piles on responsibilities, making it dangerously easy to ask, what's practical, long before asking, what do I actually want? So here is your test. With absolutely no financial or social consequences, would I still choose this? If being practical has become your automatic excuse for ignoring an exciting or meaningful desire, well, that's a massive warning sign.
And finally, Section 4, the ultimate decision test. It's time to strip away all of these rationalizations to reveal the bluntest conclusion of them all.
Here is your complete roadmap. We've covered the patterns, from overthinking to the safe choice bias to sunk cost pressure. And more importantly, you now have the exact self-test questions required to spot them in the wild. Having a framework exactly like this is the ultimate tool you need to break free from autopilot when evaluating your biggest life choices.
And that brings us to trap number 10, the justification trap. I want to end this explainer with one final provocative master question. Whenever you face a major crossroads, don't just ask if a decision is reasonable. Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it is genuinely right, or simply because it is easier to justify? I really want you to deeply reflect on that. Are you building the life you truly want, or just the one that is easiest to defend? Thanks for joining me, and I hope these tools bring total clarity to your next big leap.